Hey everybody, and welcome to D&D Horror Stories with D&D Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a dungeon master that has a crush on a player, but takes things way too far when he is rejected. A story about a Dungeons & Dragons player ruining a campaign before it can even start, and much more. So without further ado, let's get into these D&D horror stories. Incel Dungeon Master makes offensive NPCs out of spite, by Reddit user Dark Empire 40,000. So I was playing at a game shop with a fairly large group a couple years ago. Our dungeon master seemed nice in the beginning. He was a bit snobbish in a quirky nerd kind of way, but I liked him and his DMing style. I remember playing as a satyr rogue in this campaign. We had already gone through the town intro, and then went into the forest and went through a series of dungeon crawls and wild travels that led us through both nature, caves, and the Underdark. By the time we were about to go from a mining town in the mountain to an elaborate cave system that would eventually lead us to the Underdark, and eventually various layers of hell, a woman joined the group. She was the only woman in the group. She would go on to play an ASMR wizard. Both DM and another player, a halfling warlock, had a crush on her. Halfling warlock would leave the campaign a couple sessions later due to family issues across the country, so DM felt more comfortable making a move. He started out by blatantly favoring her in-game, and then he started having NPCs hit on her, most of which were enemies at this point. She seemed completely unmoved by any of this, so eventually he just asks her out to watch Netflix and eat Papa John's at his place. He asked her this at the table in front of everyone after the dungeon crawl ended. She politely rejects him and says she has a boyfriend, and he just kind of awkwardly stares at her like she is being so unreasonable for not dating him. The session then just kind of awkwardly ended. Now for another piece of context for what will happen next. DM, after that, started obsessively stalking this girl's social media and finding out that her boyfriend was black. The next session was probably the worst session of D&D I have ever played. He has us go to an ogre village called, quote, Ogreger Village, and it was filled with ogres he describes as having, quote, low IQ, pitch black skin, big fat lips, a bone ring, a gorilla nose, and a tribal watermelon pit. They also had harems of sexy human women as slaves who, quote, left their own men for exotic bestial men. After he finished describing this, we all sat back in shock for a good minute, until the girl he was into got up and slapped him and walked out. The rest of us were speechless until another player said, "That was effed up," and he just said, "Well, if I ain't getting laid, I may as well be a dick at this point." Eventually, you just get fed up with female BS and stop giving an F. We just started getting up and leaving at this point, and he just said, Yeah, go and tell the manager. I know I'm banned. F it. I was done with this stupid effing game anyway." And he just kind of angrily packed up and left the store too. We never saw him again, thankfully. But unfortunately, that poor girl never came back either. Holy crap, talk about a meltdown. Now, part of me wonders if this story is actually real, as those events just sound so outlandish. But unfortunately, I have seen videos of people going on worse tangents and acting worse than this, so there is a high probability that this story is indeed real. Honestly, the moment the girl at the table said that she had a boyfriend after the DM asked her out, that should have been the end of it. But instead, This sent the DM on some sort of spiral that led him to stalking her online accounts, finding out her boyfriend was black, and then did that. At least the DM had a little self-awareness in the fact that that outburst would make him banned from the shop. But unfortunately, OP never saw the girl again, so hopefully this experience did not turn her away from tabletop RPGs. Let's move on to the next post. A Murderhobo Tale by Reddit user MagicTrachea52. Seeing all these stories has made me finally want to tell mine. It's short, and well, sweet is not the word I would use. I know I put the flair here, but I want to reiterate that there is some in-character essay. Also, note, this is years ago. I don't recall everything that happened exactly. This campaign never made it past session 1. It was doomed from the start, as soon as characters were made. My wife and I have been freeform roleplayers since the late 90s, and we got invited by our friend, the DM, to his new campaign with some of our other friends. All names will be changed to character names. At session 0, it went sideways instantly. The DM, who claimed he was an experienced DM, press X to doubt, got us together to introduce us to the setting. Nothing special at all. Classic fantasy setup. I went with a human fighter named Army, and my wife, a human rogue named Sen. We had characters from our freeform days that worked for the setting. One friend played a warlock, which she never named, and she dropped out before we even got going. Then, her brother-in-law debuted his character, a draconian paladin named Ron Swanson. The DM just let it slide. I was already rolling my eyes. Our friend's husband went last with a female half-orc wizard named Bethelberg. We had another friend there, but he wisely opted to watch. We set up, got intros out of the way, and opted to do session 1 the following night. Things went okay at first. We did a combat intro for my wife, who hadn't played D&D before, and went to a town. That's when things went downhill. We were about 2 hours into a planned 4-hour session. I made my way with Bethelberg into a shop, and before I knew it, Bethelberg cast Fireball and one-hit killed the shopkeeper on a 20. Oh boy, Murderhobo time. DM just says, "Why?" And Bethelberg's player just says, "For fun." I move outside to get away from Bethelberg as the shopkeeper's kid ran to alert the town guard. Bethelberg rolls another 20 and kills the kid. I look at the DM and he says, "Bethelberg is rolling well. I can't do anything." At this point, I'm checked out. Ron and Sen find us, and I decide to murder the Murderhobo. Of course, I roll like a 3, so 0 things happen, except the DM says that I break my weapon. My wife looks at me and just says, "I'm done, I run away," and she's out. Ron just says, "I observe." I don't blame them for just ducking out. Bethelberg then looks at me and laughs. This is a good friend of mine, even today. He sees that I'm hot pissed, and then says, "I seduce you and have my way with you." DM says, "Okay, roll for charisma." A failing roll. Finally, something goes my way. The DM then says, "Okay, now roll for strength." WTF is happening? The DM continues, "Okay, Army, Bethelberg essays you in the street." So I'm already planning to leave. I'm done. I'm angry. The DM's inability to control anything has me totally livid. So I say, Fine. I stab myself and Bethelberg and die. DM says, roll for... I interrupt him and say, no. And I slammed my dice down with the 20 side up and walked out the front door. My friend who played Bethelberg did apologize, but I was not having it. I still haven't forgiven him for that. And as for the DM, I told him to control his table and maybe actually set guardrails. TLDR, my character got SA'd by a Murderhobo, and the DM did nothing to try and stop his campaign from becoming a crap show, and the whole campaign died in under 3 hours. Yeah, that was a bit of a dick move for Bethelberg's player to just start out being a chaos agent and doing Murderhobo things. I will never understand why people do this, especially at the start of a campaign. Like, they have to know that the other players actually want to play and do quests and stuff. Yet, players like Bethelberg's player just want to poo-poo all over it with the attitude of, I can do anything. And I agree with OP that the DM should have pulled the reins in a bit with all that crap. Sure, it is taking away a player's agency to say that they can't do certain things, but it is better to do that than let one player totally destroy the game because of the lulz. So hopefully, OP and his wife eventually found another game to play in where they could actually, play. And hopefully, that Dungeon Master learned from this occurrence that telling a player no sometimes may be a thing he has to do. But before we move on, if you are enjoying the video, I hope you consider critting that like button and subscribing. If not for me, then how about for Luna? She's starting to get a bit chonkers. But with that, let's move on to the next post. A Forever Game Master's Reward by Reddit user Narum837. I'm a forever GM of 12 plus years. I like GMing, but I mostly do it because nobody else I know wants to. I've been playing in a play-by-post game for the last 2 years. I started as a player, but then the Game Master left me holding the bag. I don't want to give too many details, as I think some of the players browse here, and I don't want to tip my hand before confronting them. But the big takeaways are, it's a cyberpunk setting, and I have a player character ready to go to swap out in case someone else wants a turn at GMing. I've managed to convince a few of the players to give GMing a shot by holding their hand through the prep process. I've achieved this by promising to A. Still run the main story simultaneously, so nobody is stuck as a game master longer than they want to be, and B. Help stat enemies or items, and balance encounters to fill out roles. Really, anything but directly working on the story. I've done this with the intent to finally get to continue as a player for at least a side job or 3. The player characters know my character, and the players understand that this character is for me to play during side jobs. They know I'm doing this to get a relief from GMing all the time. I was overjoyed when a player stepped forth and made a side job. I had my sheet ready to go. We were still chugging along with the main story. So what could go wrong? Well, they started without me. They just forgot about me. There wasn't any let's wait for the GM or end character, let's give my character a call and see if he wants in on this gig. Just nothing. Just continuing without me. Sure, we could throw me in later, but I don't like that because of the circumstances of the job. Why would my player character ever be involved? But that still doesn't address the main issue. I feel completely disregarded by this party. I've had other issues in the past, such as some of them carry on side roleplay far longer than it should go on. and ignore nudges from myself and even other players to please wrap it up so we can move on. But this was the final nail. I'm angry and disheartened at the whole affair. I've decided to confront them about it tomorrow. I don't think I can write a reasonable and level-headed message right now, so I wanted to write this to get my feelings on the matter out, and in a vague hope that one of them reads this and realizes, "Oh crap, that sounds like our game. Let me really quickly fix this and apologize." But above all else, I love this hobby. To the game masters who work tirelessly to keep everything running, thank you. And to the players of said GMs, check up on them. If they're interested in being a player for a side quest, look into running one. It isn't that hard. And if you do, please remember to actually include them. Dang, talk about a punch in the nuts. For OP to spend their time to run games for these players, mentioning that they would like to be a player if one of their players wants to try their hand at DMing, and when one of them does so, they all forget to include OP? That had to hurt a bit. Hopefully, by writing this post out, OP was able to level their head a bit, and then tell these players how that made them feel. And remember, if you are a player, to occasionally thank your DMs. They do put a lot of work into building a world for you and others to play in. And if they're a forever DM, consider trying to run a one-shot here and there, so they can be on the other side of the DM screen occasionally. I guarantee you that they will appreciate it. But with that said, let's move on to today's final story. Player can't stick to a single character. Ruins other player character story arcs. By Reddit user Cringe Child. A bit ago, my girlfriend invited me to play in a campaign she was DMing for some of her high school friends. We have just 6 players, but there have been 14 characters over 20 sessions. The relevant cast: DM, my girlfriend; me, a Spores druid; Vampire, a cleric; and Five Guy, DM's childhood friend. We start out with a decent group of player characters, including Five Guy's first character. This was a gun-based ranger with a daughter who was also a dragon. Not really fitting into the world, but whatever. However, Five Guy did not realize that controlling his daughter and reloading his gun were both bonus actions. Unwilling to juggle this, he asked DM to kill Character 1. This upset Vampire's player, since they had built their backstories together. Five Guy then moves on to Character 2, a Chronergy wizard who had a great backstory that fit into the world. Sounds perfect, right? Well, Character 2 had an Australian accent. 3 sessions later, Five Guy no longer wants to do the accent, but instead of dropping it, we get Character 3. Character 3 was part of a shadowy organization that was shoehorned in for the character, and did not fit the vibe of the story at all. Character 3 joins the party at the beginning of the church arc. My character had a lot of baggage and history with the church, so I was excited to explore it. However, Character 3 needs this super special artifact that the church suddenly has. This artifact allows him to cast a singular summon spell per day, which is, quote, vital for Character 3's build. So instead of confronting my character's arch nemesis, Five Guy demands we go into the church's treasure room. Whatever. I know my girlfriend will have the nemesis meet us there. Character 3 then proceeds to take over the ensuing combat with their summons. To cap it all off, Character 3 leaves the party directly after the arc. And now, we meet Character 4, a gnoll named Puppy Dog Good Boy. This was a homebrew warlock subclass that he had the rest of the party give feedback on until it was no longer stupidly overpowered. However, Puppy Dog Good Boy immediately fit into the dynamic of the party, forming a friendship with my druid after an initial misunderstanding, and an animosity with Vampire after another misunderstanding. Puppy Dog Good Boy stayed with the party for a couple of acts until the quote Red Wedding part of our campaign. We had a brutal combat that ended with only me, Vampire, and Puppy Dog Good Boy surviving by the skin of our teeth. As the rest of the party is making new characters, Five Guy says that he wants Puppy Dog Good Boy to retire because, quote, he was supposed to die. This meant that his character arcs with Vampire and my character immediately came to a screeching halt. Importantly, our Dungeon Master had said anyone who wanted could make a dramatic last stand, which another 2 players did take her up on. Instead, Five Guy spent the entire combat making sure Puppy Dog Good Boy survived. So now, we enter Season 2 with Character 5. This character actually took several vetoed versions. First, he wanted to be Vampire's brother. Then, he wanted to rewrite existing lore for a new homebrew subclass he made. Finally, he and the DM settled on a character concept that fit the story. When this character was introduced, we were told they were a wizard. However, they are secretly a homebrew class that he asked for feedback on, quote, just for fun. Thankfully, our Dungeon Master has said that this is the end of it. If Character 5 dies, one of the old characters will come back. Five Guy has protested this by saying that he gets bored of his character sheets, but the Dungeon Master is holding firm for now. Now, I can understand wanting to experiment with different classes and characters, but to constantly be switching had to be a nightmare for the DM, with her having to switch up prep for encounters and such. Thankfully, the DM did put her foot down after the 5th character, so that Five Guy will hopefully stick with the current one without coming up with a stupid reason why the character should leave. Like, seriously, quitting a character just because you started them with an accent that you don't want to do anymore? That is a bit much. Also, is anyone else suddenly hungry for a cheeseburger? But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.